Hello everyone. Today we have a special guest, a guy that I wanted to talk to for many months now. Really admiring your work. Yeah, without further ado, hello Tom. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on, to be honest. It's my pleasure and my honor. You are famous in the space of the YouTubes and your channel and all the truth seekers out there for speaking out loud for many things. But today I don't want to talk about things like these that are in your channel for the most part, but I want to talk to you and you to talk to me about healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've seen from your videos that you have a very fascinating philosophy and you've probably done your studies on that thing. And I'm really keen to learn more. And I hope that you enlighten all of us, me and the audience and the Greeks that are following, on things like probiotics and other things out there that most people don't know about. I mean, feel free. Let's start with the probiotics stuff. What do you think? What do you know? Please.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Cool. So there's probiotics is a massive topic and a massive industry. There's definitely, before I go any further, there's definitely a place for probiotics. There's definitely a place for that. As you said, before we started the interview, there's a lot of biohackers talk about certain things, and I've spoken about things you've never heard about. So there's it depends where you want to go with it. But basically, there's a definite use for probiotics. There's some really junk ones out there, and there's some really good ones. But probiotics are important simply because our gut health is so important. So if we don't have the right population and the right concentrations of bacteria in our gut, then we just can't perform optimally. We can't reach optimal health and vitality. So how we get that and how we manage that, that's, I guess, where the conversation will be.
Yeah, exactly. And it was I like the part where you said it's the population and the strains. So it's not just one factor. One thing I don't like about the probiotics conversation from some people is that they oversimplify. And another bad thing that you just mentioned is not mentioned, but is the quality. There is a lot of things, a lot of supplement companies, which is, as far as I know, is very unregulated as a sector, and they are literally not only not active but crap. So we talk about things that are even harmful at some points.
Yeah.
So how, first of all, let's talk, before we talk about the supplement and how can we supplement, are there any other ways we can fix our gut dysbiosis?
Definitely. Yeah, through food. That's how I do it. I don't use probiotics. Like I say, they have a place. They can be useful, but I don't use them at all. I use foods, and I use foods for clients as well. There are certain situations where I might recommend a short course of probiotics, but if people are willing to eat the right foods, and that's how you get your gut health balanced out.
Oh, interesting. So can you be more specific about the foods you eat, for example?
Yeah, for sure. So when we have food in nature, everything's in its complete balance. So even if you've got tomatoes growing in your backyard or something like that, there's a lot of microbiota that are on the surface of everything because you have insects pooping on your food, you have various other microorganisms pollinating and whatever. It's this massive ecosystem that goes on. So when we go ahead and say wash that off, we're actually washing away a layer of microbiotics. And it's not the best thing to do. It's good to do if your food has come from somewhere you don't really know how efficient they are at keeping things, keeping chemicals off food, for example. You obviously want to wash that. But my point being is that in nature, everything has a perfect balance. And when the food is healthy, when you've got food to pick that's healthy, for example, or an animal that you're going to hunt, you can tell if it's healthy or sick. A healthy animal, a healthy plant, has everything right in balance. All the bacteria, fungus, everything's all in balance. And your body will receive that and bring balance to the body. So what that means is that if we're eating enough of the right kinds of food, we are getting the right kind of information and the right kind of micro and macrobiotics into our body. Mostly that's going to come in the form of raw foods and or fermented foods. When we cook, heat, pasteurize, or whatever our food, the first thing that's going to be killed off basically is the bacteria. That's why they pasteurize foods. They superheat foods to kill off bacteria, which is not a good thing to do because bacteria, as we know in our human body, is our immune system. So when we say pasteurized milk, for example, we're actually killing the immune system that food naturally has that keeps away pathogenic bacteria. But when we go and pasteurize it, we essentially take out its own immune system. It has an immune system because it is a living food, and therefore it has a way of protecting itself and not being sickly. So I get all of my probiotics through, first of all, foods eaten raw, and second of all, foods that I culture in order to increase the level of probiotic bacteria in the food. And yeah, that's where we're going. I mean, we can go more deeply into that, but that's how I get my probiotics.
Well, I have a few questions. So,
Sure.
first, you said that the foods when we don't not when we don't wash them, but they have bacteria on them. So as I can understand. So when you talk food, you mean all food, like meat, vegetables, fruits, everything, roots. So if for example, if we take a carrot from the earth, right, and we wash it with just water, do the bacteria, for example, go away? Do they stay? How does that process work?
It's mostly washed away, yeah. There's always, put it this way, there's always bacteria on foods because there's always bacteria everywhere. Like in every surface of your house, there's bacteria that's all over us all the time. But what I'm saying is that the actual specific concentration of some of these microbiota are there based on how nature interacts with the food. So let's say it's a carrot. I mean, carrots grow underground. You only have the, the
leaves,
the leaves, coming out the top that you pull them out by. But even in the soil, you have a lot of fungus and bacteria in the soil. So that comes by worms. It comes by, the bacteria come from worms, interaction with fungus. The rain, everything that's like insects around pooping all over the food and the soil, and it goes into the ground. It's already on the food. So when we wash that off, we don't get rid of all bacteria, but what we do is we upset the natural balance that was inherently on that food. And so I'm not saying that you should avoid washing all of your stuff because most people don't grow their own. And you do need to wash it when it comes from either you don't know where it comes from, you don't know what chemicals could be on it, or it's been in a health food store or a grocery market or driven there by trucks. It's going to have petrochemicals on it. It might have cleaning chemicals on it because of what's been in a store. So if I get stuff from a store, I do wash it all the time. But what I'm just highlighting where bacteria naturally comes from and where we might be lacking getting bacteria from.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yesterday, for example, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, and we were talking about nutrition because he's bodybuilding and stuff. He's doing things, he's getting stronger, and he's from Epirus. So this is a mountain place, a mountain region of Greece with lots of dairy. So it's basically only dairy. So you can find the best dairy in Greece there. But, and I asked him, do you eat raw dairy ever? And, he was taking a bag, so he didn't like. He asked, and of course not. He's like, are you crazy? He told me. And honestly, my mother is from Epirus too. So I asked her too, and she told me that even she and her parents up in the mountains. So we're talking like 1,000 kilometers up, which I don't know how many feet that is, but it's very high. It's high. And there, the villagers, even there, they boil the milk. So they basically pasteurize the milk in a way. And that made me a little bit like skeptical because I really try to find what my ancestors eat. And if dairy, for example, is better with bacteria and enzymes than without. And I want you to a little bit, if you know something specifically about the the dairy, about the milk. Let's talk raw milk. What's the difference between raw milk? Do you know any myths regarding pasteurization and bacteria and harmful and stuff? Because I got what you're saying about the veggies and stuff, but about the milk, people are, no, they're very defensive, I think. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of myths around the bacteria in milk. First of all, people think that you can get very harmful bacteria and you can die from that. That's not the case, though, because even if you were to get some kind of technically harmful bacteria, it's only doing a job, which is to break down something that's already on its way out. So if you succumb to some kind of infection, it's because you had something in your body that's essentially makes you toxic. So what happens, though, is that the milk, here's one of the myths, of milk, is that you pasteurize it so that it lasts longer. That's one of the myths. The other myth is that you kill off bacteria that could do you harm. But again, what you're doing is you're actually killing off the mechanism in the food that makes it the healthiest. I'm going to talk about, in a moment, I'll talk about why cooking milk can actually be okay. But for now, we're just talking about some of the myths. And it can't go off. That's the thing. With raw milk, when it is left to go over time, the first thing it'll do is it'll sour. So instead of it having a slightly sweet taste, it'll have a sour taste. That's an indication that the bacteria are starting to switch over in their, first of all, in the amount of bacteria and also the type. There's more lactic acid in there. That's the sourness of the milk. Now, after it's gone sour, it'll then start separating. So if you leave that in a glass jar, instead of it looking like all white milk, it'll separate where you'll get clear liquid and then you'll get a white solid looking thing on top. So that's whey. Whey is the protein in the milk, and that's used to ferment foods and a lot of other purposes. And then you have curd on the top. That's the white stuff, and that can be made into cheese. But you could leave that for years and all you'll have is curd and whey. It will never go off and turn into, I can't stand that smell. Like if you get pasteurized milk in a milk bottle and that goes past its use by date, like it'll say best before November 5th or something because they have to put that on packaging. That will smell like you want to kill yourself. If you smell that, you'll just throw up. It's so foul, the smell of off milk. But raw milk won't ever give off that smell. Now that's really interesting because nature has a way to tell us when something has harmful levels of bacteria, and that is the smell. So if something smells putrid, like it's really off, that's our bacteria in our body speaking with the bacteria or interacting with the bacteria in the food, going, look, that's not a good match. That is going to harm you. But without a putrid odor, without it smelling bad, it smells sour but drinkable, and that smells good. That will only do you good for your body. So the interesting thing is when a food is raw in its natural state, whatever the bacterial levels are before it will produce a putrid odor, they might increase in number, but it's always going to be okay for you. When you cook or pasteurize a food, those bacterial levels can get up to 60 to 90, I think it's 60 to 80 times higher than a raw food before a putrid odor is released. So that means you could have 50 times more of the technically harmful bacteria in a cooked food and you won't smell anything. You won't smell it. You only smell the putrid odor when it gets beyond that point, which means it can be super harmful at super harmful levels. And if you look at the statistics on the CDC website of deaths from pasteurized milk and deaths from raw milk, the pasteurized milk, there's far more sickness and death from pasteurized milk than there is raw milk. And even then, if people died from drinking raw milk, it would have to be a complication of some other kind because you literally can't die from the natural bacteria in a food that is not producing a putrid odor. There would have to be some chemical in it or something wrong with the body in the first place. The body would have to be extremely weak for that to actually have a really negative effect from raw milk.
Fascinating. That's my comment. So thanks. I'm going to share that with my friend. Well, that makes sense. It makes sense. When I don't have answers in life, I usually try to understand what nature does. So, I always refer to the grand teacher of everyone of us, which is basically, the plan of God, whatever you can say. That this is the nature, the plan of nature. And I think we've disrupted this plan with our supply chains and the stores and all that stuff, and pesticides and all the stuff.
Yeah.
So another short question about milk. If let's say, for example, that you have cows and they get, all that hormone stuff, so they get hormones and to produce more milk and stuff. Let's say there is a farmer, with 5 cows, a local farmer, okay, and he's giving his cows, antibiotics and other stuff, supposedly harmful. I don't know. Could be that a healthy raw milk?
No.
No. Okay.
No. That's the other part of it, is that if you get it from an unhealthy animal, I wouldn't drink that raw.
Okay.
Because for main reason is remembering that fungus, bacteria, and parasites, for example, they have a role to play in nature. In a strong and healthy body, they're just there to be in balance and help us break down what our body doesn't naturally break down by itself. So when you have an animal that's treated badly, doesn't get enough sunlight, doesn't have access to fresh food, which is grass, which is what they naturally would eat, if they're injected with hormones and other chemicals and vaccines, then they are going to be they're going to have sick tissue in their body. When an animal or a human has sick tissue, we have a higher need for more destructive kinds of infections, such as bacterial infections, fungal infections, and more parasites than we would otherwise need. So that means that if we have the milk or the flesh from that animal, you are literally having sickness in that. And that can be susceptible to having things like that could make you sick because of the amount of extra bacteria and things that can be in that particular body or milk.
Interesting. You've mentioned before that you eat raw food or you eat them cultured. So before we go to the culture stuff and the veggies, because I want to know how you culture your food and stuff, I want to ask you a few things about meat consumption. I don't know. Do you eat meat?
Yeah.
Okay. Regarding meat, first of all, how do you eat the meat? What meat do you eat? And second of all, talk about meat and bacteria, if there is any connection.
Okay. So I do eat meat. I eat it raw. I never eat it cooked. The types of meat that I eat would be any kind of red meat or game meat, chicken, fish. I don't really eat pork. That's not because it's bad for you. It's just that I don't have a particular taste for it or a desire to eat it. And as far as the bacteria go, well, again, all food is going to be covered in bacteria, but that's a good thing. We need that bacteria. The whole fascination in the Western world of sterilizing everything is one of the reasons that we're not as healthy as we used to be, or as strong, or as able to withstand anything, potential other infections. A body that is, for example, people know with a kid not to stop a kid eating dirt, because that's how you develop your immune system. When we expose ourselves to various bacteria, fungus, everything else that's around there, and we get it in constantly, it makes us stronger, makes us more resistant to having infections of bacteria or parasites or fungus or anything else. So that's why it's important not to overly sterilize anything. Now, the type of meat that I eat and the bacteria, this is a really good question, because again, it depends on how healthy the animal is. I absolutely don't eat meat that comes from factory farming, where the animals are mistreated, don't live a natural life, are not healthy, and they're given chemicals, injections, hormones, vaccines, and whatever else. So I definitely don't eat that. When you have a raw flesh, for example, again, this is again where the odor comes in. Everybody's smelt meat that's been around for too long, or you probably have. It doesn't smell good. That's actually the signal that might make you and give you an upset stomach or give you the runs or something like that. It'll still not kill you unless that's really toxic, unhealthy meat. If it's healthy meat, even if it has a bit of a smell, I'll still eat it. So the bacterial levels are in relation to the odor that you're smelling. So no odor, smells very fresh. There's not as much bacteria on it. If there's the greater the odor, the more, wow, I can smell that meat. Like I can smell that it's aging. Then there's more. That's an increase in the bacteria is what's making that smell, not the meat itself. You know what I mean? The smell comes from the bacteria.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I was thinking as you were speaking that in the modern world we have a lot of condiments, or how are they? Not condiments, mustard,
Yeah.
pepper, and we
Yeah.
have all these spices and stuff. And I was thinking that probably we mask the smells, and we kind of create our own. We try to recreate nature's smells and odors, and we get confused because one thing about cooking, which it's not that I don't like it, but when you cook and you put spices and stuff, you lose the earth taste of the food.
Mm.
So you make a salad, for example, and then you put vinegar, you put olive oil, you put oregano, you put spice, you put salt, and you create a completely different taste from just eating a lettuce, a raw lettuce.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's fine, but that was always my question: is that beneficial for us to do? Because I was always asking myself, what are smells like you said? And I have to say this also. I was always wondering how farts, why farts smell one way and why farts smell another way. Is that healthy? Is it not healthy? What sign is that? The sulfur
Yeah.
stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, it sounds fascinating. So you don't cook at all, right? So the meat.
No, I mean, it's not that I'll never have cooked food. It's just half the reason I eat everything raw is because it's so much easier. I don't have to cook food. Saves me a lot of time and everything. But yeah, it is, to be honest, mostly for the health benefits. But the foods that I would eat cooked is something like sweet potato, maybe a bit of rice. Yeah, obviously, like those starchy carbohydrates are things that I would eat cooked. And it's only very rarely that I'll have that. They do different things. It's not that cooked foods are very, very bad for you. It's just that raw foods speed up detoxification, which is one of my main goals at the moment. Cooked foods then slow it down. And there's times for that. There's times when detoxifying very quickly is quite uncomfortable and hard on the system. So it's good to have a cooked meal to help slow that down and you give a bit of ease and relief to the body.
Okay, so different modalities.
Well, actually, that's one thing I should mention before we keep going is when people boil milk or they heat milk or warm it, that's very common in certain cultures. Ayurvedic culture in India, for example. Like you said, there's places in Greece that do that. There's places in the Himalayas that do that. They do their goat milk. They boil it up and things. It's different from pasteurizing because, yes, you're diminishing the bacteria and the enzymes, but you're not ruining the food to the same degree that pasteurization. Pasteurization is flash heating to super high temperatures. It's very, very unhealthy for that's what cauterizes the proteins, especially in the food, and makes it quite toxic to the body and indigestible. It actually makes it so that you get much more inflammation and inability to digest the proteins in particular in the milk. So when you just heat it and you have warm milk, or even if you boil it, it's not as good as raw milk, but it's also not anywhere near as bad as pasteurized milk from a commercial perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Looking back to my ancestors, for example, my grandmother, for example, and my grandfather now in the Ep.6 mountains, my grandfather is 94 and my grandmother is 88, and they're not just 88 and 94, they are strong. It's a difference. It's a different thing to be 90 and to be, doing work, doing your, cooking, moving stuff, moving objects, walking all the place, up and down in the hill. And it's another thing to be, in a hospital or in a elderly home and not being able to move. It's a different thing. And that's why I asked, because their mother, so my grandmother, was both of them. They lived up to 95, one of them, and 105, I think, the other. And even my mom, which she really messed up her health, and her health is really messed up. She has Hashimoto's and all that stuff. She has skin rashes, she's sold to the ideas of pasteurized milk. So totally different from her youth, by the way. So
Yeah.
she was drinking only goat milk, a little bit boiled, and things, not raw stuff, but much more traditionally cultured and made from the up in the mountains. And now
Yeah.
she's eating all that crap stuff, and yet even with all that crappy stuff, she's able to, have lots of energy, which is, I'm always dumbfounded because how can that be? I mean, she's a sickly woman, and yet she can be very active. And I think her youth, with all that traditionally made and food that's more earthy, not factory farmed, they made their food. They had their animals. They had their
Yeah.
vegetables.
Yeah.
Even their potatoes. Everything was. Even the wheat. Do you eat wheat? If yes, why? If no, why?
I eat it occasionally. It's not a food that I do very well on or have any kind of desire for. Like the body usually knows what it wants, and it will know when it wants something like wheat. I'll have it occasionally because occasionally my body does want it. And as long as it's organic from a natural grain, then the things with gluten and everything aren't really an issue. It's more when something is a modern version or it's genetically modified. That's when you'll have the problems with inflammation and other issues with regards to wheat. But generally speaking, ancient and organic is okay for a lot of people.
Really? That's fascinating. I thought that, I've studied about the wheat stuff and, how they genetically modified them, like I think in the 60s or something. And they lost control after that. And now it's, a monster and monstrosity.
Yeah.
We have here a wheat, traditional wheat. It's called the Zea. So Zea is basically the ancient Greek wheat, which was the culture here. I've contacted a few monks because usually monasteries and monks here, Orthodox ones, they keep the seeds, so from everything. So they don't buy, Monsanto seeds or genetically modified crop. So they keep their seeds and they continue to grow the same for centuries. So that's what I'm keen now to find more about the wheat. So thanks for that. I'm going to test that hypothesis.
Yeah. It's
And
also dependent on the body. It's like for me, even if it was ancient, organic, and all that sort of stuff, if I had it every day, I wouldn't function well. But so what happens is when we react to anything, we usually react to a protein in a food. So that's basically what gluten is. It's tiny protein, essentially. So when we react to it, we create inflammatory markers. We also can create antibodies. And it takes 4 days from having exposure to something to clear that from the system. So the inflammation that was created from a food that maybe we don't tolerate takes 4 days before that comes back down to a base level. So when we might be reactive to certain foods, it's a good idea to rotate the foods and to rotate them on a 4-day basis to give the body time to clear the result of having had a food it doesn't quite agree with. And it either keeps you under the threshold of inflammation or it allows the body to learn how to create enzymes to break that food down more effectively. If we don't do that and we continue to eat foods that don't agree with us every day, that's what leads to long-term health conditions, long-term chronic inflammation, inflammatory effects such as Hashimoto's and other autoimmune conditions. And we can, as I said, we can mitigate that by rotating our food. So for me, I would only have wheat once every 2 weeks or a month, maybe at the most. I would definitely don't have it every day. I don't even have it every week. If I did have it more often, I wouldn't function as well as I do now.
Okay.
Other people, though, from different cultures, they have it every day and they're fine. They don't have the inflammation. They don't have other effects. So again, it's dependent on your genetics. It's dependent on your bloodline. It's dependent on your state of health already, because a healthy person is going to break down and digest anything. Somebody with the more compromised your gut is, or your metabolism, or your functioning body, the more compromised that is, the less foods you'll find that you'll tolerate well. Wheat being one of the ones that'll be first on the list to create a problem.
Well, that goes against many things that I've studied in the past, because Well, you know the paleo community probably. They are especially the fanatics ones. For example, I was studying a book from Norakit Gauda, so the paleo something again, and C and a few other guys in the famous biohacking community, like Dr. David Perlmutter or something, and they are against wheat altogether. Same with William Davis. So these are prominent, in the social media world, biohackers or at least experts. Okay.
Yeah.
So you say that wheat could potentially, for some people especially, be tolerated and even well digested if they have specific ancestral, the genetic material, and if, of course, they're healthy. So they have a healthy digestive system.
Yeah.
That's very intriguing because I was searching a company. It's called Bio Optimizers. Do you know them?
No.
Well, yeah, it's promoted by all these biohackers and stuff. And so these guys, the two guys from Canada, I think, and they did they created this company and they created enzymes. So their focus is basically HSL, so hydrochloric acid and stuff, and peptic enzymes, all that stuff, bile and stuff.
Yep.
And they have a product called gluten-free, gluten warrior something.
Oh,
So yeah, and they claim that this product can help you digest gluten without any problems. And that's what I thought when we were talking about gluten like a protein. So yeah, that's something really to search more.
Yeah,
Honestly.
well, that's not new. There's been companies, probably at least 7 years ago, I was seeing companies bringing out gluten enzyme, an enzyme supplement that breaks down gluten. But here's the thing about all of that is that you've just got to look at where people are benefiting. So I'm aware that there is a whole industry called biohacking. I'm not into it at all myself because what it does is, to me, I'll just say from my perspective, what it does is oversimplifies and over isolates things and then tries to make things sound like they're the quick fix to everything. Whereas if you just live naturally, there's no such thing as biohacking. And I also don't see any of these biohackers doing anything that's extraordinary. I don't see them. I just don't see them doing anything extraordinary except for telling everybody how great they feel and everybody should buy their products, because it almost always has to do with a product or a procedure or buy my thing or buy this or pay me that. It very rarely has anything to do with, hey, if you just do this every day, long term, you'll be healthier, which is to me what biohacking should be about. It should be like, get off your screen more and spend more time in the sun and the fresh air, which people do talk about. So that's one. What's something else? Spending more time just, with bare feet on the soil, that kind of thing. Meditative practices, everything that is natural and available to us for free that we should be doing. To me, that's what biohacking is. It doesn't have to do with like, hey, buy these lights and sit in this sauna and then take these supplements and this new thing. And they're all expensive. It's just, to me, it's an industry and it's a big industry. There's a lot of money and there's a lot of people. For example, before I got known for making that virus video a year ago, I was consulting for a lot of people, and I won't name any names, but I consulted for people who are big name biohackers who present this persona of being vital and energetic and strong and all this. Meanwhile, I'm treating them for gut dysfunction, depression, weakness, limp dick, all this sort of stuff. They're not as healthy as they're trying to portray on their social media or their websites. Not all of them, but I'm just saying I consulted and brought back the health of people who were in that realm, making a lot of money off their websites and Instagram and things and YouTubes and things as biohackers. But to me, it's like, it's the same as a microwave. It's like a quick fix mentality. It's like, I don't want to take full responsibility for connecting myself to myself and to nature. So how can I circumvent that? How can I make food quicker and not have to spend the time cultivating food? How can I get my brain functioning more instead of just doing meditation? What mushrooms can I take? What can I microdose? It's not how can I actually learn how to function better. That's my issue with the biohacking world. And that's why I think the things that I'll say, you might go, I've never heard that because biohackers don't talk about it. But I think biohackers, not all of them, but I think in general are too far down the path of trying to go for quick fixes and not take responsibility for developing those skills or that health themselves, and not enough in line with connecting to self and nature And that's personally why I don't gravitate towards the biohacking world.
Well, that makes two of us because I had the same issue with biohackers. Although I have a few that I really not admire, but I really follow exactly because they seem to. I don't know if they claim, at least they show that they are, they are farming and stuff. They're doing, they are claiming that the sun is the best thing, the air, the quality. So I always follow people that are at least half of the way of doing things naturally and promoting mostly natural things
Yeah.
instead of the expensive Russian pills. Technology can always improve people's life. Okay, so that was the case in many things in the ancient past too, but we always have to find our foundations and things. And people, the quick fix mentality is something that people have in our society. And honestly, these people that you said that you treated them and stuff, I've seen the pride myself. I think this is the sin of pride more than the sin of biohacking. I think that me, myself, right now, as I'm talking to you, I have got dysbiosis. So I'm not ashamed to say that I have problems at least for months, which I'm kind of solving at some points, but at the end of the day, they come back. Now I'm worse for the past month. And, I think when you are prideful and you say you know all things, you are done. Your spiritual self is killed, so you kill your spirit because you lie extensively in order to have a facade. And that's my problem with these people. They are probably as much victims as they are victors, or because in a sense they know they lie, but they think they have to lie so that the people follow some of their advice, and some of their advice might be helpful, and they know it. And there is a constant wheel of lies from everybody, and it pushes everybody to to worse. it's
Yeah.
it's
No,
weird.
I agree. Yeah, people create a persona or an avatar, and that avatar precedes them. It sits in front of them, and the avatar is the thing that's all proficient and competent and knows its stuff. And the avatar creates a lot of attention and money, which feeds the self that's creating the avatar. But the problem is, like you said, there's no integration with that. So there's a hollowness there, which is never fulfilling. So the avatar gets all the attention and the money to feed the self, but the self isn't interacting with the world in an authentic way. So it can never be fulfilled in that way, no matter how rich or famous or whatever that it gets. And I've seen that. And like I said, not everybody is like on that level. I'm sure there are people out there that are great, that promote a lot of good stuff. Quite often, I think it always is promoting products and things as well. But at the end of the day, the other element of this, though, is there are a lot of people who are very healthy, very strong, and very fit, not because of what they do, but in spite of what they do. Their advice is not good. The products they use aren't good. The supplements aren't good, but they're still fit and healthy and strong, and they present really well, and to inspire people, but they do that in spite of, which means that if you are not genetically gifted, if you are not genetically made to be like that, like some of these people are, you're either going to get no results, or you're going to actually be made to be sick by some of that advice. Same as professional athletes. You shouldn't go, well, Usain Bolt, he set a world record in the 100 meters, and he ate 6 chicken nuggets. That's all he ate from McDonald's before he ran his race. So I'm going to go on the Usain Bolt 6 chicken nugget diet because he's an exceptional athlete. But he does that in spite of what he does. So we should never look at genetically gifted athletes as our source of inspiration and try to do what they do, because without their genetics, you're probably just going to hurt yourself.
That reminds me of way back, 3 years back. My brother, I have an older brother who is genetically muscularly gifted. Okay, so he can do one push-up, and it shows like as if he's benching 300 pounds. Yeah. So it's weird. And there was a time that I had a few friends that wanted to get into fitness, and I introduced them to my brother, and I was at that time, and still I am doing fitness, exercising, all that stuff. And of course, I'm not genetically gifted. I'm I'm very mediocre in the genetic part. And I was trying to give them advice, but my physique wasn't there. And my brother, he lifted up his shirt at some point and he shows his abs. And my brother, was inactive for years, 3 years, and he had a full six pack. And it was so funny to see a couple of my friends literally ignore me for the rest of the evening. Ignored completely as if I wasn't even there, and trying to ask my brother questions about the fitness and how they.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so impressed by the stupidity of the people inquiring about their health, because this is exactly a point that you made, and I've seen that all over again and again and again. There are many people that are genetically freaks. I don't know how to explain this. Nature did that. I don't know. I really had friends too that they are just freaks of nature. They eat McDonald's and they poop well, and their bowels are well, their stomachs are fine. I eat McDonald's and I die. I will be in coma for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So this is probably a great thing that you said. I never thought about it in the biohacking sphere, but probably a couple of guys, it's like they say with the champions. So you do that and you become a champion. Well, it's not the case. All the swimmers, the top 20 swimmers, are probably kind of the same physique. They are monsters, all of them. So the champion of them, it's just a few tweaks here and there, a little bit of luck, a little bit of more work ethic, but they're all freaks. They would be there anyways if they train.
Yeah.
If I go to be a swimmer, I'm fucked. I'm like, I'm 5'7". I'm a midget. I'm probably, and I'm not good in coordination. So this is not my. And probably it's the same with bowel movements and all that stuff. Anyways, I'm sorry I detracted the whole.
Well, a lot of it is. Most of it's genetic too, even to your digestive health and everything like that. There's also, we all have different, even though we're all human beings, we actually all have very different natural tendencies towards some things. Some body types have natural tendencies towards being sluggish and moving towards constipation. Other body types have more tendency towards being overly flighty and anxious and things, and have they're more likely to have loose bowels and things like that. We all have a tendency, and if we're not eating or living a lifestyle in tune or in line with our natural strengths and weaknesses or tendencies, then we might find that we're not functioning very well at all. So there's a lot to be said about that. But the there's the gut health is a big thing, and that seems like a big thing in your story. And there's two main causes for that. It's essentially, it's really only two. One is toxicity. This toxicity is too high. And two, you're deficient. You're deficient in vitamins, minerals, or enzymes, or bacteria, or all of them. So if those two factors are brought into balance, then you don't have the gut issues. But there is one other main component to that, and that's the mind. If the mind is running wayward, if it's overly active, if it's overly stressed, it's going to wreak havoc on the gut, and vice versa. And that's one of the other elements about biohackers. Some people they're so keen. They're like, whoa, I just ate lemons and I feel amazing. And their eyes are like this and that. And it's like, that's not going to happen in everybody that eats lemons. It's the fact that they're so excited about it because they're not chronically ill. What you generally want to do is find people who got chronically ill and manage to get themselves back over time, and then find out what they do. Because if there's nothing super wrong with you, let's say you're an athlete, maybe you're an accountant, or you just you're a mechanic, I don't know, but you generally, there's nothing really wrong with you. And then all of a sudden you just go, I don't want to work in that anymore. I'm going to be a biohacker. And you're just excited about everything. Everything is going to have an effect. It's like, oh, I just put plastic on my head. It's like, oh, hey, I feel amazing. Whoa. Okay, everybody, you got to do this. You got to put plastic on your head. Man, I just feel fantastic. But there's nothing wrong with them. And then the next week they're like, oh no, I'm doing something else now. I'm eating cucumbers. Did you know that cucumbers are really high in cucumberism? And that's just making me feel amazing. And everybody listening is going, I want to feel amazing. I don't have any energy. I'm going to do this cucumber diet with a plastic thing on my head like this biohacker, because they never had anything wrong with them in the first place. They're just getting excited about every new thing. And anytime you're excited about something, you look vibrant because you're speaking quicker. Your eyes are bright. You're like, I'm excited about this. But do it for 20 years. You know, I always say somebody's going to talk about diet, eat that way for 20 years, don't change it, and then show me that you're still vibrant, healthy, you're still shitting properly, everything's working well. But don't tell me you've done something for 3 weeks and write a book about it, you know? It's or like do a podcast on it because you just took one course of probiotics, now everybody's got to do it. But that's not how it works. You've got to prove things over time through winters and summers and through flus and colds and everything else. Like do that, and then you'll find what really works and what really fixes the body, which in my experience is ameliorating toxicity, which in the gut plays havoc, and then also just making sure you've got the right balance of food. So when somebody's got gut issues, for example, taking foods such as, well, it's not a food, but technically it is bentonite clay. Something like a quarter teaspoon of bentonite clay before you start your day sort of thing, that at least goes and absorbs toxicity in the stomach, takes it out of the digestive tract. It'll also draw toxins out of the digestive tract as it moves through. And then making sure you've got high enzymes food in the diet, and then also foods that are high in bacteria like raw meats, raw dairy, culturing foods like your milk, making yogurts from that, culturing meat and making fermented high meat. Like that's super high in bacteria. There's just all of those things are going to help to rectify a gut over time. But can probiotics do it? Yeah, for sure. There's definitely good quality probiotics that can do that. But to me, when you take a part out of a whole and just go, this is the answer, it can never be the answer, because we are a whole thing. We interact with ourselves. We interact with our environment. We interact with our creator. You can't just pull out our heart and go, this is how a heart beats, because it only beats because of us and our thoughts and our emotions and who we are and everything else in our body. So you can't, to me, take a culture of probiotics and say this is going to fix all of your gut issues, because it's not a whole thing. It's a part of a whole. It can help, but it's not the same as a cultured food, which has energetics from the environment embedded into it. It has memory in its cells. It has everything that a supplement can't have. It can't have that memory and that information, that genetic information about the environment. And that's why I favor things like cultured foods, because the food has that, as well as all these tiny little cofactors like other enzymes, micronutrients, macronutrients, microbiota. It's all in there to function as one whole thing that our body can recognize it has a genetic memory of, because it's part of nature. Whereas you just culture a probiotic and sell it in a capsule, it can help, like I say, especially if someone's got a wrecked gut. But will you ever reach the optimum level of health? I don't believe so with supplements and pharmaceuticals. I just don't believe that you can. I think you really need to be doing it the natural way for your body to recognize that and to function that way.
Nice. True. Can we really copy? Can we really be better than nature's plan? I mean, are we humans so out of line? I think we try, without even knowing, unconsciously, we try to be gods. So trying to mix different micronutrients that they shouldn't be there, different quantities, too much vitamin B12, no folate, and we try to do lots of weird things with our supplements. And supplementing is basically, like you said, you can never reach nature's plan. Now, because we have a few minutes more, I want to talk to you about farming, because you said that it's better to basically culture food, raw food, real food, and slowly but surely let go of most supplements, because if you eat real good food, that would be fine for the gut and for everything. Many people claim that the soil is depleted. I'm hearing that from everybody. We have a depleted soil, so we need vitamin B12, we need vitamins, we need micronutrients, minerals, whatever. And what do you think we should do as the last point for today's conversation regarding farming, regarding raising animals, regarding seeds, regarding all that stuff? Do you think it would be a better investment for somebody to really get into farming or at least involved, with the community?
Definitely, that's my short answer. I'll tell you though why that's an important question, because even just going back to what we were talking about, can you really match nature? Well, imagine that somebody is deficient in vitamin D, or they're just deficient in just red light in general. So if they get heated by far infrared, or they get red lights in their home, their health will improve, no doubt. But it'll never match what the sun can give you. And that's the same with supplements. People can definitely live a better life because of supplements when they have major deficiency, but it will never take the place of the real thing. And so with farming too, it's the same thing. You can't replace natural farming because of everything that gets embedded in natural food that you can't have in a supplement. Even if it's a natural supplement, if you get all organic, greens, for example, and you dehydrate it, make a powder out of it, and then you mix it into a drink and drink that, it's still not the same as having an organic vegetable. It just can't be, because the ionic charge is lost once the water is gone. And part of the nutrient transport system is an ionic charge. That's how a cell knows how to open its channels in the cell wall to bring something in. It's by the minerals with their positive and negative charge. It tells the cells how to bring things in. You don't get that added back in just because you stir it into water. So you lose a lot of information when you powder something. It's just not the same as a real food. So the reason that I still favor foods in this circumstance is that, yes, absolutely, our soils are depleted compared to what they used to be, no doubt whatsoever. They're also more poison than what they used to be. But what we do have now is access to more of it. So we could have cow's liver once a week if we wanted to, whereas back in the day, you wouldn't have it that often. We can have access to, more than once a week. We could have it every day if we wanted to. So we have access to nutrient-rich foods. Even though the soil is more depleted, we can consume more of it because of the access that we have to it in our modern world. So ideally, like you said, I do firmly believe that if everybody started to take an interest in their garden and in farming, we could regenerate the soil within maybe a decade, maybe two at the most. And in the meantime, while we're getting enough of the sustenance, then we are getting enough. We're getting enough in that way. So let's say an apple today has a fifth of the nutrients of an apple yesterday, but we can eat 10 times as much. Well, we're still getting more nutrition. We'll get more nutrition eating 10 less nutritionally dense apples than we would one highly nutritionally dense apple. You know what I mean? Because we have access to more of it, more variety of food. We can have a big variety of food these days because of the system that we live in. So the system that we live in doesn't really serve us, but in that respect, it's helpful in that way. But as I said, in order to start decentralizing things, bringing it back to community, and for people taking more self-responsibility, looking less to biohacking ideas and products and protocols and just getting more stuck into the garden, they'll find that their health will increase a lot more, and their vitality. But also, the thing that you can't measure, you can't quantify, is I'll just call it the part that's in touch with your inner self and a higher purpose. It doesn't come from the biohacking world. It's all about the physical realm. But the more you spend time doing things like gardening and farming and getting in touch with nature and doing things the natural way, things are going on in our subtle bodies, in our etheric nature, in our connection to a spirituality that is just not quantifiable, but you miss out when you're trying to circumvent that by biohacking. Do you know what I mean? And that's why some people are going to, physically, can they deadlift 600 pounds? Maybe not. But there's a level of things that you can't measure, that they are so much more advanced, and not just advanced, but so much more, there's just a depth of contentment there and health that you can't measure, that they're experiencing, that on the surface, because they're not out running 100-meter records or deadlifting 600 pounds, you go, well, I'm going to go with the biohacker. But it's like you and your brother, you're somebody who's gone through things and had to have learned. You've had to take an interest in many different ways of looking at things. Your brother is gifted. He's just going to recommend what he does, which might not be good at all. Do you know what I mean? It's like who knows more about running? Usain Bolt or his coach? It's probably his coach, and his coach would know far more than Usain, but Usain can outrun him every day. So we tend to have this thing of looking in the wrong direction, and that's what I mean about the subtle bodies that make up our life. You can only go so far in life and without being aware first of all, of your subtle bodies. And then from being aware, it's being more attuned with them. And from there, it's growing into them. And that's why people will go and move away from society and live on top of a mountain, whatever, because they're like, I don't need to do it. I don't even need to eat anymore. I'm getting all of my energy from like the sun, for example. And they're just growing into these bodies that most people aren't even aware that they have because they're cut off from them. And so that's another topic altogether we could talk about another day, but that's like where you can split, with where your interest lies.
Yeah. Wow. I'm not going to add anything on that because it was really the best ending on any conversation that you can have. I hope, my personal hope is that people stop quantifying things so meticulously and we take a step back and try to remember our ancestral, history. When I say history, I don't mean the wars. How really people can live in sync with nature. And that's something I also try to do. And that's my purpose, if you can say so. I want to bring a few memories from my grandparents and bring them back to society, to the Greek society for starters. And this is a journey, of course. This is a process. But I think what you said about the spiritual, the ethereal, and all the bodies, something that we cannot quantify, that science cannot put in a box and sell it.
Yeah.
That's something that we have to come in grips in terms with. There is something. There is a God, if you can call it so. And I hope that everybody's, more in tune with that. So, having said that, I have to admit that this was a blast for me. So, many, many, many thanks that you came over, because I really like your view on things. You always put a spin on things that's different from, not the mainstream per se, but you always put a more natural spin on things, and I like that. I like the simplicity of your thought, and which is very lacking in our day. Simplicity and strategic and long term. I like that. Is there anything else you want to share before we close this?
No, I think you kind of summed it up. It's almost like that's an old expression or it's an old rule. I think it's called Occam's razor, something like that. Usually the simplest answer is the right one. And it's really, that's what I've found over 20 years. I've gone down those routes of trying to, find the fix for everything. And generally it's a dead end. So when you come back to nature and you come back to simplicity, there's something happens where your body opens up a lot more to a lot of things, even energetically, and that just leaves a lot more room for healing. So I like what you said, where it's almost like in every situation, the simpler something is, the better. And more we have to go more complex and trying to break things down, generally that's a dead end road. In my experience anyway, it's been a dead end.
So, by the way, where can people follow you? What are you up to these days?
Yep, you can, just my name, Tom Barnett, on YouTube and Facebook. I keep getting censored on those, so I have my own site, which is launching in, I think, a day, and that's tombarnett.tv. So that's, it's just all the same stuff, but it's archived, so you can't lose it. And then when I've done quite a few interviews on people's private networks, and so I can't put those on public channels like YouTube and Facebook. So there's some lectures, some workshops, some interviews that people haven't seen yet, and that's all on the tombarnett.tv website. So by the time I guess you get this up, I'll probably have the site up. So.
Oh, cool. Great.
Yeah.
All right. I will check this myself. So great.
Cool.
Having said that, thanks for coming again. And I hope to talk to you in a few months or more, and in a year probably, and see what we can talk about more. And
sure.
What is there more to talk? Because I think there is, and I think you have a lot to say, man. So thanks, and have a nice evening, I guess.
Yeah, coming into the evening now, yeah.
Yeah. So see you around, and everybody listening, thanks for listening, and write us a comment. How do you find our raw milk conversations? And subscribe to Tom's website when it comes live. So, see ya.